let's explore whether a 10-day Vipassana retreat is safe. Wrong button. There we go. This morning's lesson is drawn from a good-hearted question found in the comments. It pertains to Vipassana retreat trauma, and the good-hearted person wrote, "The retreat I attended was Vipassana. I also started to..." So first of all, right off the bat, and none of this stuff is your fault, and I'm not picking on you at all. I promise I do not desire to behave like a rabbit troll. But there are cults prancing about the countryside, lifting perfectly innocent terms and twisting them to mean something else. Vipassana simply meant contemplation. That's all. But it has become something different. Over many, 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 many decades, it has become a culty thing. Now, first off, we don't know much. We don't know if the Buddha was real or merely archetypical. Therefore, we don't know if the majority or the entirety of the Buddhist scriptures are apocryphal or not. But in a fairly prominent sutta, I think it's the Patinibbana Sutta or the Mahayana Nirvana Sutta, one of the two, we read that as Buddha lay dying, felled by an assassin's poison, he explained, "I've taught with an outstretched arm and an open hand, keeping no secrets." If someone promises to teach you the Buddha's teachings, but they say they can't do it here, they have to do it there, they can't do it in public, they have to do it in secret, they can't do it easily, it has to take place in a 10-day retreat, we'll only be fed one meal a day, won't be able to speak a word, those are some red flags. Now, it's not your fault you didn't know that. But that is some really creepy, culty stuff. I've worked with many people who have endured that. The Buddha's path is, the Buddha's Eightfold Path is, well, I should say 50% of the Buddha's Eightfold Path pertains to loving kindness. The people I've met who are enthusiastic participants in that went stomped and sorted their way through life without love or kindness. But I've spoken to so many more people who were just chewed up and spat out by the 10-day retreat. People were told that if their emotional crises they endured during the retreat were just mental storms. But when the Buddha described his path in 7 points, he referred to the fringe benefits of joy and peace. If you're using a method that doesn't bring you joy and peace, but that brings you such turmoil that it is called a storm, and it's such a frequent occurrence that your instructors have a term for it, big old red flag. Sturgeon's law reminds us that 90% of everything blows, and not in the fun and tingly way. Therefore, it should not surprise us overly when the majority of meditation teachers tend to be rigid, fearful, suspicious, controlling, elitist, cryptic, competitive, and even cruel. This shouldn't surprise us, but it can still break our hearts. These weren't the Buddha's attributes. These were the attributes of the Buddha's wicked cousin, Devadatta. The Buddha's attributes were to be flexible, loving, rational, laid back, egalitarian, lucid, cooperative, and kind. Some people misrepresent the teachings maliciously. The majority misrepresent the teachings just because they are lazy-minded and gullible. A tale is told that Einstein once quipped that any educated fool can make things more difficult, more complicated, and more violent, but that it takes a lot of courage and a little bit of genius to move in the opposite direction. The Buddha taught an easy path. For those culturally already acclimated to comfortably sitting cross-legged on the floor, Buddha taught that one could master his path in 7 days. Not a lifetime of 10-day retreats, just 7 days. For those of us who weren't raised like that, for the majority of us, you need to learn how to sit in an ergonomically sustainable method. Might I recommend setting aside 5 minutes every 12 hours or so to sit and to practice the techniques I plan to show you today. You can even set a timer on your smartphone and just come to one of my live streams. I broadcast every 12 hours or so. And if you can't make it, that's okay. YouTube does a very good job of storing my live streams. And the first week, you can come practice, sit with us 5 minutes every 12 hours or so. The second week, maybe 10 minutes every 12 hours or so. The third week, 15 minutes every 12 hours or so. By the conclusion of the 15th week, you could be comfortable sitting for 75 minutes. That's a 15-minute lesson and a 60-minute practice, because it's progressing gently and incrementally. There's no stress for your partner or pets or children or employer. You're not jumping off the radar. Because you're not sworn to silence, anytime you have a question during a live stream, you can ask it in the chat window. Anytime you have a question after the live stream, you can type it in the comment area. Let's return to the original question. I also started to experience spontaneous movement, i.e. kriyas, after. When a difficult ordeal creates spontaneous and involuntary emotions in our body, that is a red flag. I'm not a physician. I'm not a therapist. I'm just a meditation teacher who's been around the block a time or two. It's been my experience that such phenomena can be a trauma response. Either A, the 10-day retreat was traumatic, or B, the 10-day retreat triggered an earlier trauma. Additionally, it can be an orange flag, a hint that maybe you might want to work with a mental health professional who specializes in neurodivergence, disorders like autism or ADHD or both. It has been noticed that when people who are neurodivergent are exposed to the virus that creates what's it called? Myalgic encephalomyelitis, it can result in aberrant behavior, tics, and motor tics, and gait loss, and grip loss. So sometimes the majority of humans walk around with the, what's it called? The Epstein-Barr virus. But not everyone is susceptible. People who are neurodivergent or have survived trauma or have autoimmune disorders are going to be more susceptible. So if someone is in a physically traumatic situation and they have pre-existing conditions, then that could certainly be the case. And I'm mentioning this not to be alarmist, but because unmet medical needs can have dire consequences. In late-stage capitalism, and even the practice of medicine is for-profit, people easily fall between the four boards and are misdiagnosed horribly. So many physical disorders are brushed off as psychiatric disorders, and you don't need that. So find a physician who is experienced in those things. If you don't have a reliable psychiatrist or neurologist you can work with, I recommend going to pcrm.org. I don't get any commission for telling you this. They have a Find a Doctor service. You can Google it. And you can find MDs, board-certified MDs, specializing in psychiatry, who've done the extra work, who are lifetime learners, and instead of just being, minions of the pharmaceutical industry, these are people who are continually learning and sharpening and making connections. Find someone who specializes in neurodivergence or trauma or both, because I've never met someone who is neurodivergent who wasn't traumatized. Now, as I mentioned previously, Buddha's method is easy and tranquil and joyful according to his outline of the 7 enlightenment factors. Therefore, if someone's teaching you something and it's difficult and it's filling you with turmoil and it's making you sad or angry, guess what? What they're teaching you may be something, but it's not the Buddha's path or the attributes that the Buddha promised. And once again, not everybody is malicious. Many people are just foolish. So the question, and I jumped ahead of myself because I got all excited. I need thoughts on how it will resolve. I also have so many feelings bubbling up to the surface, but I'm not sure how to release them should I stop meditating. So once again, this turmoil is indicative of something that was not what the Buddha taught. Buddha taught techniques that were easy and joyful and tranquil. Just because someone claims to be an authority in Buddhism or thinks they are or is recognized doesn't mean they are. The test of a teacher is not who approves of them or how they're dressed. The test of a teacher is simply the results their students generate after applying their advice. So the question is not if you should meditate, but which meditation you should use. And so I'd like to explore this with you through the lens of neuroscience. Now, I touch on this frequently, so do forgive me if it sounds like I'm beating you over the head with a shillelagh. So any organization that tells you to concentrate is going to have you overtax your medial prefrontal cortex, which will cause your blood to gather at the amygdala, which is the seat of aggression and anxiety located at the bottom of our limbic system. Similarly, Any organization that coerces you into active contemplation will overtax your dorsolateral prefrontal cortex and compound that same effect. Well, that's really sucky news. How do I, like a curious cat who's enthusiastically burrowed their way into a empty bag that formerly contained Doritos. Backing out can be a challenge, but an amusing thing to see in a YouTube video. We can back out much easier, simply by using a different facet of our central nervous system. Every time we inhale, whether we know it or not, we are accessing our sympathetic nervous system, ensconced within the thoracic or ribcage region of our spinal cord, despite the creative liberties taken by this artist. The sympathetic nervous system did not evolve to support either extreme of mind blanking or active concentration. It has evolved to simply help us to notice. To notice vulnerably, passively, viscerally, and randomly. To help us to notice sights, sounds, sensations, flavors, scents, and the like. To help us to notice emotions, intentions, thoughts, memories, and imaginings. Now that could feel overwhelming. Fortunately, every time we exhale, whether we know it or not, whether we mean to or not, whether we intend to or not, we are accessing our parasympathetic nervous system, ensconced within both the lower lumbar region of our spinal cord, as well as its tippy top, the brainstem. This parasympathetic nervous system has evolved to support both physical relaxation as well as mental release. Now, I don't know about you, but everybody else I've met has had a brain that was a lot like Urkel. Meant well, very gifted, but really spazzy. So, just as Urkel's spazziness could be sublimated into a project because he was good-hearted. Same thing with our brain. If during our inhalation, we give our brain a simple job, the simple job of silently and mentally reciting the demonstrative pronoun this, then our brain will be aligning its purposes with those of our sympathetic nervous system, and we will experience the type of perception known as mindfulness or sati. When we ask our brain to silently and mentally recite the part of I forgot what part of speech yes is. Let me look that up real quick. Please bear with me. Okay, let's go over here. Adverbs. Okay, well, that's interesting. During our exhalation, we can invite our brain to silently and mentally recite the adverb yes. In doing so, our brain will be aligning itself with the intention or the purpose or the wiring of our parasympathetic nervous system, helping us to practice the type of mental release known as meditation. And so instead of living in perpetual resistance, we can live in therapeutic acquiescence. So you got to take care of yourself. Our body can oppose our recovery from our trauma, or it can support our recovery from trauma. Therefore, it's imperative to get enough. Oh, good grief. What's going on over here? It's imperative to get enough sleep, fresh air, sunshine, exercise, recreation. Consume the foods we have evolved to thrive on. Fruits, vegetables, seeds, nuts, herbs, spices, mushrooms, grains, legumes, tubers. These things are the foodstuffs we evolved to thrive on, especially when they're whole and not processed. A PCRM physician can help steer you in that direction as well. If you are in a highly traumatized state, I recommend performing this meditation, the This Yes meditation, while taking a brisk walk around your block. Once again, you can set your timer. But a brisk walk around your block will help you to physically process these traumas. Now, this is no substitute for being under the care of a professional whose speciality is trauma and neurodivergence. But this will help you. This is a good start. This is an excellent adjunct. This will do no harm. I am sincerely sorry that well-meaning people subjected you to two techniques that are utterly, utterly harmful. I assure you, this does not besmirch the Buddha. This is not an indictment against you. You just learned about some people who did more harm than good. Fortunately, every day is a new opportunity to take new actions and experience greater healing. I do look forward to sharing a very super easy and gentle and fun and therapeutic meditation method with you after approximately 30 seconds of housekeeping. This is Lama Jigme Gyatso of the Buddha Joy Meditation School. For more than 30 years, I spent about 8 hours a day, almost every day, studying, practicing, mastering, and reverse engineering the teachings and techniques of each sect of Buddhism so that you would not have to. Welcome, my friends, to meditate like a Jedi, which is made possible due to the generosity of viewers just like you. Oopsie. So now let's play with the latest iteration of a practice text, or sadhana, I call Love and Letting Go. Oh, excuse me. I was up very late last night editing this text. Now, it seems that this is not edited as beautifully as I'd like to. So, what I'm going to do there we go. Let us bring the Satipatthana 4 bases of mindfulness. And that's just a fancy way of saying the circumstantial, the physical, the interpersonal, and the mental. So let's bring the 4 bases of mindfulness into the anicca, into the path of anicca impermanence. Excuse me. Let's chant. Observing the coming and going of circumstantial phenomena, help us to see that ever-changing one and all, there is nothing permanent to grasp. So a synonym for circumstances is lots. So what we're doing is not an exercise in belief. We're just playing with words. We are just silently and mentally and passively reciting words in harmony with our inhalation and our exhalation. Now, I'd like to perform this exercise for 4 rounds. But what's a round? A round can be described as 1 inhalation followed by 1 exhalation. So how do I intend to count to 4? I intend to advance my left thumb during each inhalation and slide it so that it comes to rest upon one of the sets of creases found upon my left little finger or even its tip. Please practice along with me as silently and mentally we recite. And now the physical version. Observing the coming and going of physical phenomena helps us to see let's try this again. Helps us to see that ever-changing one and all, there is nothing permanent to grasp. And we're using the word form as a synonym for body. Observing the coming and going of interpersonal phenomena help us to see that ever-changing one and all, there is nothing permanent to grasp. So we're using feels to describe the interpersonal. Observing the coming and going of mental phenomena help us to see that ever-changing one and all, there is nothing permanent to grasp. In Buddhist culture, a circular pointed structure known as a stupa is thought to represent a Buddha's mind. So having contemplated impermanence, whoops, look what I forgot to do. Here we go. Un momento, if you please. I must rummage around for something in a different text. Let's see. All right. Thank you for your patience. Let us bring whatever we spontaneously notice into the path of awareness and letting go. During our inhalation, we can silently and mentally recite this. During our exhalation, we can silently and mentally recite yes. So what I'd like to do is this. Thus far, we have counted 16 rounds on our left hand, and that's fine and dandy. What we can do on our right hand is count sets. So first set of 16 rounds, second set of 16 rounds, and the like. So now let's count several rounds of 16 sets of spontaneous awareness and letting go. Now, this might sound like these are wild terms of me, but awareness is just another term for sati, or mindfulness. And letting go is just another term for samadhi, or meditation. Allow me to remind you that every time we breathe in, we're wired to generate a vertical traction between our tush and our head. And every time we exhale, we're wired to relax a little bit. So it's not that we're forcing posture, it's just that we are no longer resisting our natural urges to automatically and effortlessly assume strong posture. And like anything else it's learned, the first day is harder than the second day. The second day is harder than the seventh day. The seventh day is harder than the 30th day. Having climbed to contemplative cruising altitude, together as a team, let us meditate as transformatively as General Leia Organa on Ajahn Claus under the guidance of Luke Skywalker. Now let us bring the Satipatthana 4 bases of mindfulness into the path of metta, loving kindness. Since we are not alone in all frustrations, we could also long that others' mental needs also be met. Since we are not alone in all frustrations, we could also long that others' interpersonal needs also be met. Since we are not alone in all frustrations, we could also long that others' physical needs also be met. Since we are not alone in our frustrations, we could also long that other circumstantial needs also be met. Let us bring whatever we spontaneously notice into the path of awareness and letting go. Again, let us bring the 4 bases of mindfulness into the path of impermanence. Observing the coming and going of circumstantial phenomena, help us to see that ever-changing one and all, there is nothing permanent to grasp. Observing the coming and going of physical phenomena, help us to see that ever-changing one and all, there is nothing permanent to grasp. Observing the coming and going of interpersonal phenomena, help us to see that ever-changing one and all, there is nothing permanent to grasp. Observing the coming and going of mental phenomena, help us to see that ever-changing one and all, there is nothing permanent to grasp. Let us bring whatever we spontaneously notice into the path of awareness and letting go. Since we are not alone in our mental frustrations, we could also long that others' mental needs also be met. Since we are not alone in our interpersonal frustrations, we could also long that others' interpersonal needs also be met. Since we are not alone in our physical frustrations, we could also long that others' physical needs also be met. Since we are not alone in our circumstantial instructions, we could also long that other circumstantial needs also be met. Let's seal this morning's practice by percussively chanting loving wishes for universal enlightenment and well-being. May all minds clear yet impermanent be as enlightened as a Buddha's mind. May all experiences of the interpersonal resounding yet impermanent be as loving as a Buddha's speech. May all bodies sensual yet impermanent be as beautifully healthy as a real or imagined Deva's form. May all circumstances appearing yet impermanent be as safe and abundant as a real or imagined Devi's land. If you feel that I have earned it, you could give this live stream a thumbs up. You could even help support this channel. In approximately 9.5 hours, I would very much like to return to lead to today's evening meditation class and group practice. And if you are as geeky as me, may the Force be with you always.